From space, it looks like a giant alien starfish dropped onto the outskirts of Beijing. On the ground, it's something else entirely. A single building so large you could fit 80 football fields inside it. A terminal designed to process 100 million passengers a year. A control tower that can land a plane every 45 seconds. This is Beijing Daxing International Airport. It cost an estimated $17 billion to build, and depending on how you count the surrounding infrastructure, some estimates push the total project cost toward $50 billion. But here's the question nobody's asking. Beijing already had an airport, a massive one. So why did China build a second one? Bigger, stranger, and far more ambitious, just 20 miles away. The answer says a lot about how China builds things differently than the rest of the world, and not all of it is good news for the people who used to live here. To understand why Daxing exists, you have to understand what it replaced, or rather, what it was built to relieve. Beijing Capital International Airport, opened in the 1950s and massively expanded for the 2008 Olympics, was choking. By the mid-2010s, it was handling close to 100 million passengers a year, designed for a fraction of that. Delays were constant. Airspace over the capital was some of the most congested on Earth, shared uneasily between civilian flights and a heavily restricted military zone. China's solution wasn't to expand the existing airport. It was to build an entirely new one from scratch, on a scale that had never been attempted. The site chosen sat on the border of Beijing and Hebei province in Daxing district. Flat agricultural land, conveniently empty on a map, far less empty in reality. An estimated 10,000 residents across several villages were relocated to make way for construction. Compensation packages were issued, but as with most Chinese megaprojects, the people who'd farmed that land for generations had little say in whether they'd be leaving. Construction broke ground in 2014. 5 years later, in September 2019, President Xi Jinping personally inaugurated the airport, timed deliberately, just 2 weeks before the 75th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. This wasn't just an airport, it was a statement. So why does it look like that? The design came from a team led by the late Zaha Hadid, the architect famous for buildings that look like they're still moving. Daxing was one of her final projects before her death in 2016, completed by her firm afterward. The terminal is built around a single radial structure, 6 piers extending outward from a central core like the arms of a starfish. It's not just an aesthetic choice. It solves a very specific, very expensive problem: walking distance. In a conventional, sprawling terminal, think Beijing's old airport or Dallas-Fort Worth or Denver, the farthest gate can be a 20-minute walk from the entrance. Daxing's radial design means that from the central core, no gate is more than 8 minutes away on foot. That single design decision is why the terminal can be massive, 700,000 square meters, making it one of the largest single airport buildings on the planet, without making passengers walk for miles to catch a connecting flight. The roof tells its own story. It's a single continuous canopy supported by 8 C-shaped columns, engineered to flood the interior with natural light through a massive central skylight, while eliminating almost all interior support columns. From the air, that roofline is the starfish everyone talks about. From inside, it's something closer to a cathedral. And the scale of the steel involved is staggering. Engineers used over 50,000 tons of steel in the roof structure alone, assembled using techniques borrowed from Chinese high-speed rail construction to hit impossible deadlines. But the real story of Daxing isn't the shape, it's what's running underneath it. Daxing was built as a showcase for full airport automation, and in 2019, much of it was genuinely ahead of anywhere else in the world. Facial recognition handles check-in, security, and boarding for domestic flights. Passengers can move from curb to gate without showing a physical document once. Baggage handling runs through one of the largest automated sorting systems ever installed, capable of processing 20,000 bags an hour with minimal human intervention. Underground, an automated people mover system shuttles passengers between terminal zones, while a dedicated high-speed rail line connects Daxing to central Beijing in just 20 minutes. Built specifically to solve the second airport problem that's crippled cities like Shanghai and Tokyo, where the secondary airport ends up an hour plus from downtown and passengers avoid it entirely. That's not a small detail. Plenty of countries have built massive new airports that flopped because nobody wanted to actually travel to them. China built the rail line before the terminal opened. So if the technology is this advanced and the design solves real problems, why does Daxing still feel, to a lot of travelers, strangely empty? Daxing opened in September 2019. 4 months later, COVID-19 shut down global air travel. The timing could not have been worse. An airport engineered for 100 million annual passengers, designed around projections of explosive growth in Chinese aviation, opened straight into the worst collapse in aviation history. By 2020, Daxing was operating at a fraction of capacity. International routes, which were supposed to be a major part of its traffic, barely existed for nearly 3 years. Even now, years later, Daxing handles a fraction of its designed capacity, closer to 40 to 50 million passengers annually, well below the eventual 100 million target the airport was built for. Some terminals and piers, fully built and fully automated, sit largely unused on a given weekday. And then there's the debt question. Megaprojects like this are financed through a mix of state funding, municipal debt, and infrastructure bonds. And China's regional governments are already carrying enormous debt loads from a decade of building roads, rail, and airports, often faster than demand could justify. Daxing isn't unique in that. It's part of a much larger pattern of Chinese infrastructure spending that prioritizes capacity for the future over demand in the present. Whether that bet pays off depends entirely on whether China's aviation market keeps growing the way planners assumed it would in 2014. Before COVID, before a property crisis, before growth projections got a lot more uncertain. There's also a quieter cost that gets left out of the headlines. The villages of Daxing District that don't exist anymore. The families who farmed flat fields that are now under a terminal floor. China's megaprojects move fast precisely because that friction, the kind that slows down airport expansion almost everywhere else in the world, gets removed before construction ever starts. So is Daxing a triumph or an overreach? Engineering-wise, it's hard to argue it's anything but a triumph. The radial design genuinely solved the walking distance problem better than almost any airport built before it. The automation, the rail integration, the construction speed, 5 years start to finish for one of the largest buildings on Earth. That's a level of execution most countries simply can't match. But Daxing is also a case study in something bigger. What happens when a government can build at any scale it wants, on any timeline it wants, with very little anyone on the ground can do to stop it? It's the future of airports, built using methods most democracies couldn't replicate, for a passenger boom that hadn't yet been tested against a pandemic, a property crisis, or a slowing economy. Daxing isn't really a story about an airport. It's a story about what China is willing to build, how fast it's willing to build it, and what gets left behind when it does.